Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brand John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show. I am Brad. That is John Combest. Good morning to you, John.
Good morning, Brad.
John, you know, sometimes I like to play Guess John's Top 3. And
oh, yeah, and you do pretty well, Brad.
can I take a guess at this morning?
Please do.
I think one of the top 3 will be another one of the provisions of this bill that's going through the Missouri legislature in special session that has not been fully vetted, that people are sort of like, oh, we just found this in there. Remember, it was just the other day that I think it was the Post-Dispatch discovered that not only was there money for the Royals and the Chiefs, but there's also money for the Cardinals Stadium. Wasn't that the revelation we had the other day?
Yeah, there's not money for the Cardinals Stadium, but it gives the Cardinals the opportunity in the future to use some of these mechanisms to get a better stadium deal. There is no money for the Cardinals in this bill.
Well, I found out that there is money for another thing on this side of the state, on the east side of the state.
Oh, yeah? What's that, Brad?
John, you sound like...
Does it have to do with one of your many imaginary beefs?
No, not at all. The money is $2 billion for the expansion of Highway 94 from 40 down to Augusta to 6 lanes in each direction to accommodate all the new traffic that's going to Augusta since the Hoffmann family of companies have built that new golf course and I think it's up to a 32-story hotel tower.
And nice, Brad. Hopefully they'll have a little, like a little guarded fenced area where the plebeians can sit and throw rotten fruit at the Hoffmans while the Hoffman team continues to make money. And the have-nots get mad about it.
And the 50,000...
And maybe an unreliable source from the Hillermans can totally make a comment about decrease in business, because that's reliable.
And the 50,000-seat amphitheater. That's what I heard in the bill.
Yeah, you might be right about that, Brad. And you'll complain about it because you hate brand new roads. You don't even want to pay 1/1,000,000th of a cent sales tax. It would hurt your ability to drive to North City and deal with some shady customers to get $10 off a lawnmower.
John, don't typify me like that. If they raise the taxes, I have no problem as long as they put in the Schatz amendment that I can, take all my receipts and I have to have them each one notarized by a notary public and then have them driven down to the North Pole, driven up to the North Pole, have Santa put his notary stamp on it, brought back down, then I have to send them on the back of a camel to Jefferson City and I get my money back. Because I think that's only fair, don't you, John?
Yeah, I think so. And, here's the thing. It's not hump day, but we can celebrate camels today. I mean, you smoke them. Some people in the Middle East ride them. We love camels.
Speaking of cigarettes, I could tell you an interesting story that's happened to me many times, which I think is fascinating. Okay, that's John Combest. Why do we have him on the air? Because of the fact that he gratefully appreciates the fact that I put him on my radio station, and he never says anything bad about radio. He's always saying, I don't know why people use this thing called X. I don't know why people use this thing called Instagram. Radio's where's that? That's what John Combest all the time. But what we do is we start off his top 3, and that is the top 3 of the dozens of things he has on johncombest.com. We bring in this guy. What's your name, sir?
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what do you do?
Now on with the countdown.
And we start off with?
In third place,
a fun follow-up from a topic that we discussed in A Block yesterday, part of the top 3 yesterday, the congressional baseball game. Let's start with the bottom line. The game raised $2.8 million, more than $2.8 million for charity. We touched yesterday on some of the charity items that were included in their Washington area Boys and Girls Club. We're talking Washington, D.C., not Washington, Missouri, and other local D.C. type area charities, also charities to help the Capitol Police as well. Now let's cut to the chase, Brad. Republicans stomped the Democrats once again by a score of 13-2, which in the congressional baseball game, in which defenses are generally pretty porous, a 13-2 score is actually pretty low for the congressional baseball game. And Eric Schmitt once again led Republicans to victory. Now, Brad, I didn't watch the whole game yesterday, but I saw Senator Schmitt got on base a couple times, had at least one ribby that I saw. That's an RBI for the non-sports fans there, and helped lead the Republicans to another dominating victory. And yesterday, I failed to mention, Brad, that Southwest Missouri Congressman Eric Burleson also played for the Republicans, so he was in the game last night as well. So a big win for charity, perhaps most importantly, but also kind of a feel-good victory for Republicans, stomping the Democrats on the field yesterday.
What position does Eric Schmitt play?
Plays left field.
Who was pitching for the Republicans?
A guy named Stuber. Apparently he's from Florida, and he fell off a ladder a couple years ago, really injured himself. He's an old guy, kind of like you. But he ended up having, I was amazed at the kind of control that he had.
Is he getting, I mean, is what, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour? Did they put a clock on it?
No, I would say he was probably around 60 miles per hour, I would say.
Really?
It always surprises me when guys can throw a ball. This is going to sound arrogant and condescending, but when old men can throw a ball 60 feet, 6 inches and actually get it over the plate, and sometimes even have a little bit of movement on it, it's impressive.
John, there was a guy, I heard this on another radio station the other day. They were saying that the Democrats used to always win because there was a guy who pitched for the Democrats who used to be a minor leaguer who was getting the ball up into the lower 80s. Do you remember who that was?
I don't remember who it was. No, they flashed a few scores or flashed a few highlights on the screen yesterday of guys who had legitimate baseball careers. I mean, to your point, Brad, there's pretty much no way a middle-aged guy and older that's an amateur is going to hit an 80-mile-per-hour fastball.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, all you got to do is just stick the bat out there. You know what I mean?
That's pretty easy. Yeah, that's all it takes, right, Brad?
John, I watch these YouTube videos all the time, and you ever seen the guys they're like in the pitching cages? You know what I'm talking about? They're
in the batting cages, yeah.
Well, no, they're nobody's batting on. They're just guys their cage is set up specifically for pitching.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
Occasionally you have a guy who stands in there, but most of the time it's just like catcher and a pitcher, and they have the radar behind it. And there was one the other day where the guy was like a high school football coach or something like that, and I would say late 30s, early 40s, and he was throwing 90-mile-an-hour heat. I'm going like, whoa, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a unique built body to be able to do that at that kind of age, But then look at a guy like Nolan Ryan. Right. He was throwing heat well into his 40s as well.
Right. And once in a but there was a rumor I heard that Nolan Ryan was actually taking the air out of the balls when he got up. We talked about that yesterday. Remember, right, John?
Yeah, 2 days ago he was actually deflating the balls.
Right. Okay. Number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
Brad, there was a big party downtown last night, and it was hosted by my favorite group of people, the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Now, I don't know how you could possibly oppose a party that stands for socialism and liberation. They had an event downtown last night near Union Station, and they were protesting Donald Trump. And another group that calls itself 50501, or at least 50501, that stands for 50 protests, 50 states, one day. They had an event at the Tam Avenue overpass right there on Highway 40. Now, if you had to judge which one was better, I'm going to try to be an impartial arbiter here. You got a bunch of socialists downtown, and then you got another group of people that might not call themselves socialists officially on Tam Avenue. I think the tiebreaker was the protest on Tam Avenue featured none other than American hero and former Congresswoman Cori Bush. Cori Bush comes back to life, Brad, resurfaces at the Tam Avenue protest. So, I mean, I guess we could hope that maybe this is a political comeback for Cori Bush. But anyway, let's get to the main thing. They're mad about ICE. They're looking for some reason to protest. 5 years ago, a bunch of savages took to the street and they were mad because the fentanyl guy said he couldn't breathe and he died and whatever. And so they were able to riot and march and do all that stuff and get a bunch of sympathy. And now 5 years later, it looks like immigration is going to be an excuse to stomp around and be real mad and have short hairs with pixie haircuts come out and and a bunch of Mexicans come out and sweat. Can you imagine how these protests smell? It's disgusting. I bet. I don't know. I wouldn't go around them. Anyway, so 2 big protests yesterday, Brad, and these are happening all around the state. The Kansas City Star today has a really helpful piece. They tell you where protests are going to be this weekend because, the liberal mainstream media loves to encourage protests. So there's some really cool visuals from both St. Louis Public Radio. As you know, Brad, St. Louis Public Radio should put all of their emphasis not on audio, but on visuals. St. Louis Public Radio and the Post-Dispatch have some inspirational pictures of a bunch of sweaty foreigners hanging out downtown and hanging out on Tam Avenue.
John, you want an inside media joke?
I do want one.
The protesters on the Tam overpass were actually protesting the weather.
They were? Why is that, Brad?
You don't get that joke, do you?
No, is that because that's where all the Tam Avenue, that's where all the news broadcasters,
Right.
Fox 2 used to be there, and you'd say, okay, and here's what the snow routes are going to look like. And now it's 141 and 40, right?
Well, it still is Tam Avenue overpass, or closer to your neck of the woods, the J.J. Kelly overpass. You know where that's at, right?
No, go ahead and educate me, Brad. You don't know where that's at? I don't know where that's at. Where is it, Brad?
The J.J. Kelly overpass is the overpass just north of Manchester. You can't get on and off there. It goes from one side of 270 to the other. That's the J.J. Kelly overpass. But
oh, nice. Okay.
The Tam Avenue overpass is notorious or famous, whichever, because when there's let's say it was like November right now, and Dave Murray, takes off his shoes and does his forecast from Palm Springs, California, and everybody thinks he's in St. Louis. And he says, oh, there might be some snowflakes this afternoon. Then immediately, all the news directors in town get on the two-way. Immediately take your van over to Tam Overpass, set up to have the shot so that you can see the Highway 40 traffic lined up behind you, and we'll do a voiceover on that, and we'll do a two-frame with the guy at the J.J. Kelly overpass. No, the Tam Avenue overpass is the one where they set up. As a matter of fact, sometimes I've driven and there's 3 of them, all 3, 2, 4, and 5 were all set up on the Tam Avenue overpass, next to each other. It's just okay, I talk about McRadio. Can we call it McTV as well too? It's just
or maybe McWeather.
McWeather, cookie cutter stuff. Okay, was that number 3?
That was number 2, and we're almost ready for number 1. And you already know what it is, Brad. Didn't you say that you had predicted the top 3?
Yes. You ready?
I'm ready.
The number 1.
In an anticlimactic vote yesterday, the Missouri House voted 90 to 58 to send a plan for the Kansas City Royals and the Kansas City Chiefs and a little bit of storm package funding to the governor. Not a lot of drama in the House yesterday, Brad, for the vote. As we discussed last week, after the Missouri Senate passed the stadium bill, let's just call it the stadium bill going forward, even though there is other stuff in there. We'll just call it the stadium bill. After the Senate passed the stadium bill, we anticipated there wouldn't be a whole lot of drama in the vote, and it turns out there wasn't. Now, I linked today to a few news stories about this, of course, from the Kansas City Star and the Post-Dispatch and St. Louis Public Radio and others. But I think a really interesting point comes from the Whispering Gallery, which is, of course, put together by the great Jake Kroesen of the Missouri Times. And Jake went back and he looked at members of the House who voted one way at the end of session on the bill and then flipped their vote one way or another. Now, there were a few folks, Brad, that originally voted no on the stadium and then came back and voted yes. So an example of that would be a guy the unfortunately named Steve Butts from St. Louis City. He's a Democrat. He's often on the Reardon Roundtable. He's one of the guys. He's one of the 6 folks that flipped from being no originally to being a yes yesterday. But there were more people who originally voted yes at the end of session and then came back, ostensibly after talking to constituents or learning more about the plan, and then came back and flipped and voted no. And in our area, that includes guys like Brad Banderman, state rep in Franklin County. He's from St. Clair. We also have Wendy Hausman from St. Charles County, Dave Henman from St. Charles County. So we had a few local folks who originally had voted yes and then came back and voted no. Now, Brad, my analysis of this is that this is to be expected Because when a vote isn't particularly close, so for example, when it got 90 votes, you need 82 in the Missouri House. A speaker or other people will, to use industry term, release their members and say, hey, we know this is a tough vote for you and it's unpopular in your district. And if you got to vote no, we understand. So I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm not saying that Speaker Patterson went to anybody and actually did that. In fact, I don't think he probably needed to. But it's always easier to vote for something and then come back and say, well, after talking to my constituents, after diving deeper into the plan, I realize it's not a good deal. And then you release those members and then they can say they voted no, but knowing that maybe they actually don't think the plan's that bad. You get what I'm saying, Brad?
I do, but I've got an important question for you.
Oh, yeah? What's that?
You're always on top of this kind of stuff. How did the Wingnut Caucus vote?
I just looked up, I used ChatGPT to look up Wingnut Caucus, and I didn't see them. But I would presume, Brad, that pretty much every member of the Missouri Freedom Caucus, if that's who you're referring to, would vote no on this.
You think?
Yeah, I think so, Brad. I think they would oppose this.
So, in other words, if they would have voted yes, they would have resigned from the Wingnut Caucus? Is that what you're saying?
Well, nobody has resigned. They just have, Rick Bratton left his spot as chairman of it, Brad, as the leader of it. But he's still a member of the caucus.
But he's still in the Wingnut Caucus.
Well, that's what you like to call it, Brad. Someday we're going to, nobody cares enough to do this, but someday we will look back and think, when exactly did Brad flip on Nick Schroer? Like, when did he get 8 inconsequential mail pieces from you that he chose to throw away like a normal human?
John.
Or when did you decide that you didn't like Nick Schroer?
John, you don't have to look back. I'll tell you exactly it is. It's the same thing.
When is this?
It's the same thing with Josh Hawley. When Josh Hawley runs for Attorney General and says in his campaign ads, I will not use this position as a stepping stone to a higher position. And 2 minutes after he gets elected to Attorney General, and once again, the Constitution of the state of Missouri says the Attorney General must live in what is it, Cole County? Where is that, Cole County where Jefferson City is?
Yeah, that's right.
Must live in Cole County. Josh says, I'm the Attorney General. I'm supposed to enforce the laws. I don't care about that law. That law is not enforceable. I'm going to remain at my house in Boone County. Okay, that's when I lost Josh Hawley. When did I lose Nick Schroer? When he pulls this charade where he's saying, I don't live in Defiance. I live in this lady's basement in O'Fallon. Okay, Nick. Yeah, right. Like you live in the ladies' basement in O'Fallon. Why? Because of the fact that he says he had to move to Francis Howell School District because Fort Zumwalt didn't have a class for his kid. Okay, whatever. That's when I lost Nick Schroer. Because he could have come out and said, yeah, I really, I needed to take care of my kid. And yeah, I know it's a charade, but I've declared my legal residence in this lady's basement in O'Fallon. And you know what? Wink, wink, nod, nod. I really don't live there. But you know what? That's what the paperwork says. And that's all the law requires that the paperwork says. I gotta go, okay, Nick, I love the guy.
There you go. Okay, I think we beat that horse to death. And as I always point out, Brad, the people in his district seem to like him, because they elect him. And in fact, you didn't flip on Hawley when he decided to run for Senate, because you famously went to an event with Shelley Barr, at which I'm sure you were kind and sweet and smiled and nodded because you thought you'd get some advertising money. And you sure didn't confront him on switching from AG to running for Senate back then. But then he doesn't advertise with you and he becomes a punching bag.
John, did you read my mind about what's coming up next?
I hope I did. Yeah. Are you going to talk about Josh Hawley?
No, but something very similar to that.
Ooh, good. By the way, I was pleased yesterday. Not only am I getting a strong signal, I was down 44 yesterday. Not only am I getting a strong 104.5 FM signal, thanks to you, Brad, but I also heard the voice of Egbert on the radio yesterday. I thought you had put him on ice, Brad.
You don't listen to the radio very much, do you? Because Egbert's never come off the radio.
Oh, wow. So you did a big rebranding, and then you left Egbert on.
John, to be honest with you, Egbert has some disabilities, and when I tried to take him off, his attorney contacted us and said that if we took him off, we would face the wrath of Brown and Kroesen.
Okay.
Because the fact that
that's understandable.
That Egbert's disabilities result from a slip and fall that he had at the Old Cats drugstore. But you have to be really old to know what the Old Cats drugstore was.
I used to see him up at Renderers all the time at Bell Park Plaza.
Okay, John has foreshadowed something interesting because John has foreshadowed the very first edition of Brad's Top 3, which is coming up.
Oh, that was yesterday, so tomorrow will be the second, right?
Oh, no. Today is the very first official Brad's Top 3.
Oh, I love it. Okay, did you do an AI jingle for it?
You're way ahead of me, John.
I bet you did, Brad.
Okay,